The moment my sister-in-law took the microphone at my own birthday party, I realized she had never intended to celebrate me. More than 80 people filled the banquet hall. Friends, customers, neighbors, family. Everyone smiled as they gathered around the large birthday cake. I had spent 2 days decorating myself. My husband, Daniel, squeezed my hand. "You deserve tonight." I smiled. I just want everyone to have a good time. That had always been my weakness. I spent so much time making other people happy. I rarely asked whether anyone was trying to make me happy in return. My name is Claire Morgan. I'm 36 years old. I own Sweet Haven Bakery, a small family bakery in a quiet town outside Chicago. People know me for birthday cakes, wedding desserts, fresh bread every morning before sunrise. Children often press their noses against my bakery window just to watch cupcakes being decorated. I loved every minute of it. Making people smile through food never felt like work. It felt like home. People always ask why I became a baker. The answer is simple. My grandmother raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 11. She never had much money, but somehow, she always managed to bake a birthday cake. No matter how difficult life became, she used to tell me, "A homemade cake tells someone they're worth your time." I never forgot those words. Years later, when I opened Sweet Haven Bakery, I hung that sentence inside my kitchen. Every cake I baked carried a small piece of her love. 6 years ago, I met Daniel Morgan. He wandered into my bakery one rainy afternoon asking for coffee. Instead, he left carrying a cinnamon roll, a loaf of fresh bread, and my phone number. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He was simply kind. After a year of dating, he proposed in the bakery kitchen while I was covered in flour. I laughed so hard I almost dropped the mixing bowl. Life finally felt complete. At least, until I met his family. His mother, Margaret, was polite, but distant. His older sister, Jessica, never even tried to hide her opinion. The very first time we met, she looked around my bakery before quietly asking, "So, this little shop actually pays the bills?" I smiled politely. "It keeps me busy." She laughed. "I suppose hobbies are important." Daniel immediately changed the subject. Later he apologized. "Jessica doesn't mean anything by it." I wanted to believe him. Unfortunately, that wasn't the last comment. Every holiday, every family dinner, every anniversary, Jessica somehow found a new way to remind me that she believed I wasn't good enough for the Morgan family. She criticized my clothes, my business, my education, even the way I arranged flowers on the dinner table. The insults were never loud, never obvious, always wrapped inside polite conversation, just enough that everyone could pretend they weren't insults at all. Daniel usually stayed quiet, not because he agreed, because he hated conflict. "I'll talk to her," he'd promise. Sometimes he did. Nothing ever changed. Jessica always apologized, then quietly found a different way to embarrass me. Year after year, this birthday meant more to me than usual. Sweet Haven Bakery had just celebrated its 10th anniversary. Business had never been stronger. Customers insisted on organizing a surprise birthday dinner. Daniel secretly rented the ballroom at the Lakeside Country Club. My bakery staff decorated everything using soft cream and gold flowers. There wasn't anything extravagant, just warm, comfortable, exactly the way I liked it. For the first time in years, I genuinely felt excited. The evening began perfectly. Children from families I'd baked birthday cakes for hugged me. Former wedding clients introduced me to their babies. Several elderly customers brought handwritten birthday cards. One woman held my hands and smiled. "You've made every birthday in our family special." I nearly cried. Moments like that reminded me why I'd chosen this life. Then, Jessica arrived, fashionably late. As always, she entered wearing an expensive designer dress that immediately attracted attention. Several guests greeted her. She smiled confidently, walking into every room as though she owned it. She handed me a neatly wrapped gift. "Happy birthday." "Thank you. I hope you finally enjoy something expensive." She smiled sweetly. Several nearby guests laughed awkwardly. I forced a smile. Daniel quietly squeezed my shoulder. Ignore her. I nodded, like I always did. Dinner passed peacefully. For almost 2 hours. I allowed myself to believe maybe Jessica had decided not to ruin another family gathering. Then the restaurant manager approached our table. Would anyone like to say a few words before dessert? Before Daniel could stand, Jessica reached for the microphone. I'd love to. My stomach tightened immediately. She smiled warmly at the audience. I've known Claire for 6 years. Several guests applauded politely. Jessica laughed. You know, when Daniel first told us he was marrying a baker, our family honestly thought it was just a phase. A few people chuckled uncomfortably. I looked toward Daniel. He frowned. Jessica continued. But somehow, she turned cupcakes into a career. More laughter. She wasn't finished. I suppose every family needs someone who can bring dessert. The room became strangely quiet. She raised her glass. So here's to Claire. The only member of the Morgan family who always remembers the frosting. This time, nobody laughed. The silence hurt more than laughter ever could. Daniel slowly stood. Jessica. She smiled innocently. What? It was a joke. I quietly touched his arm. It's okay. But it wasn't. Because I recognized the expressions around the room. Embarrassment. Sympathy. Discomfort. Nobody knew what to say. My own birthday had somehow become another opportunity for Jessica to remind everyone I didn't belong. As the evening ended, guests slowly left. Many hugged me before leaving. Several apologized for Jessica's behavior, even though none of it had been their fault. After the ballroom finally emptied, I looked around at the decorations. Half-melted candles, empty plates, deflated balloons, a birthday cake hardly anyone had eaten. Daniel wrapped his arms around me. I'm so sorry. I leaned against him. I'm just tired. He kissed my forehead. I'll take the gifts to the car. I'll clean up. You don't have to. I know. But baking teaches you something. What's that? No matter how beautiful the celebration, someone still has to clean the kitchen afterward. He smiled sadly, then carried the presents outside. I stayed behind, completely unaware that inside one forgotten gift box, someone had left behind the truth that would change the Morgan family forever. After the last guest left, the ballroom became almost painfully quiet. Only the soft music from the ceiling speakers remained. The staff cleared empty plates while I folded tablecloths and packed leftover desserts. It wasn't because anyone expected me to. Cleaning had always been my way of calming down. When life became overwhelming, keeping my hands busy usually helped my heart catch up. Nearly an hour passed. Daniel returned after loading the gifts into our SUV. You ready? In a minute. He kissed my forehead. I'll wait outside. As he walked away, the event manager approached carrying one small gift box. I think someone forgot this. She handed it to me. Unlike the other presents, it had no ribbon, no birthday card, just a plain wooden box wrapped in faded cream paper. There wasn't even a name attached. I don't know who left it. She apologized. I smiled. That's all right. I slipped it into one of the larger gift bags. At the time, it looked like the least important present of the night. When we finally arrived home, it was almost midnight. Daniel carried the larger boxes inside while I placed the cakes in the kitchen refrigerator. The house felt unusually quiet. Maybe because birthdays always reminded me of my grandmother. Every year, she had stayed awake until midnight just to be the first person to wish me happy birthday. I still missed her. Daniel yawned. I'm exhausted. So am I. We can open the presents tomorrow. I nodded. You go to bed. I'll finish putting everything away. He smiled. I married the only woman who cleans after her own birthday. I laughed softly. I own a bakery. Cleaning is practically part of my personality. After he went upstairs, I made myself a cup of tea, then began opening the gifts one by one. Handmade cards from neighborhood children, a cookbook, fresh flowers, gift certificates, a framed photograph from my bakery staff. Each gift reminded me how loved I was outside the Morgan family. And strangely, that made Jessica's words hurt even more. Finally, only one gift remained. The plain wooden box. I gently removed the wrapping paper. The box itself looked old. Very old. Dark walnut wood. Brass corners. Tiny scratches covered every side. It didn't look like something anyone would buy from a gift shop. It looked like something that had been carefully kept for decades. The lid resisted slightly before opening. Inside, there wasn't jewelry, or money, or another birthday gift. Instead, I found an old leather-bound journal. The edges of its pages had turned yellow with age. Tucked beside it lay an ivory envelope. Across the front, written in elegant handwriting, were 5 simple words. For whoever truly belongs. I frowned. This can't be for me. Yet somehow, it had ended up inside my birthday gift. The journal felt surprisingly heavy. As I carefully opened the first page, my breath caught. Written across the inside cover were the words, Samuel Morgan, my late father-in-law. I'd only known Samuel for a little over a year before cancer took him. Unlike the rest of the family, he had always treated me with quiet kindness. He loved stopping by the bakery every Saturday morning. He never left without buying cinnamon bread. Not because he needed it, because he knew supporting small businesses mattered. Sometimes he'd stay for an hour just talking with customers. People adored him. I slowly turned the page. The journal wasn't a diary. It was more like a collection of personal reflections. Stories about family, business, marriage, life lessons. One entry immediately caught my attention. It had been written nearly 7 years earlier, before Daniel and I were even engaged. Samuel wrote, "Families are tested not when life is easy, but when someone new arrives carrying different dreams." I kept reading. The measure of character isn't how we treat those born into our family. It's how we welcome the ones who choose to join it. Tears formed in my eyes. Those words sounded exactly like him. Another page had been folded. As I carefully opened it, a dried lavender flower fell onto the table. Between the pages, Samuel had written, "If Claire ever becomes part of this family." I froze. My name, written years before our wedding. How? I continued reading. I hope Margaret and Jessica learn to see what I already see. Kindness builds stronger homes than pride ever will. My hands started trembling. Samuel had written about me before I'd even married Daniel. Just then, Daniel walked quietly into the kitchen. "I thought you were coming to bed." He noticed the journal. "What is that?" I turned it toward him. His expression immediately changed. "Dad's journal. You've seen it before?" He slowly shook his head. "No. I thought it disappeared after the funeral." He carefully picked it up. I remember Dad searching for this during his final months. Daniel turned several pages. Suddenly, he frowned. "This page wasn't here." "What do you mean?" "There used to be something folded inside." I looked closer. Tiny marks remained near the center fold. Something had clearly been stored there for years. But now, it was gone. The following morning, neither Daniel nor I could stop thinking about the journal. Before opening the bakery, I called attorney Linda Foster. Linda had handled Samuel's estate after his passing. She agreed to meet us that afternoon. When she saw the journal, her eyes widened. I never knew this still existed. Daniel looked surprised. "Dad never mentioned it?" Linda quietly answered. "He once told me, if the journal was ever found, someone should read the final pages very carefully." She slowly turned toward the back. The last several pages had been written only weeks before Samuel died. His handwriting had become weaker, but still perfectly readable. One paragraph made all 3 of us stop. "There is one promise I have never told my family about." Linda looked up. "What promise?" I continued reading. "One day, the journal will explain why Claire belongs here far more deeply than anyone realizes." Daniel stared at me. "I don't understand." Neither did I, because the next page had been torn out, cleanly, deliberately. Only a narrow strip remained attached to the binding. Whoever removed it had done so very carefully. Linda gently closed the journal. This wasn't accidental. Daniel looked worried. Do you think someone removed it after Dad died? Linda nodded slowly. I think someone knew exactly what they were looking for. As silence filled the room, I looked once more at the empty space where the missing page had once been. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide Samuel Morgan's final promise. And suddenly, Jessica's determination to make me feel like I never belonged didn't seem quite so personal anymore. Because if that missing page was ever found, it might prove I had belonged to the Morgan family long before anyone was willing to admit it. I couldn't stop thinking about the missing page. Whoever had removed it hadn't taken the entire journal. They'd left behind every memory, every lesson, every handwritten reflection. They'd removed only one page, the one Samuel himself described as a promise. That wasn't random. That was intentional. The following morning I opened Sweet Haven Bakery at 5:30 like always. Rolling dough usually helped clear my mind. Not that morning. Every loaf of bread I placed into the oven reminded me of the journal sitting inside my office drawer. Customers came and went. I smiled, made coffee, decorated cakes, pretended everything was normal. Inside, nothing felt normal anymore. Around lunchtime, Emily Ross stopped by carrying fresh flowers. She immediately noticed something was wrong. You haven't smiled all day. I laughed softly. I'm smiling now. That's your customer smile. I know your real one. Emily had been my closest friend for nearly 15 years. There wasn't much I could hide from her. So, I told her everything. Jessica, the birthday party, the journal, the missing page, Samuel's strange promise. Emily remained quiet until I finished. Then she asked one question. Who packed Samuel's office after he died? I blinked. I don't know. Daniel had never mentioned it. That evening I asked him. He thought for a moment. Mom. And Jessica. They cleaned everything before the funeral. I slowly looked at him. So they would have found the journal. He nodded. They probably would have. Neither of us said anything. But we were thinking the same thing. If the missing page disappeared after Samuel died, only a handful of people had the opportunity to remove it. Attorney Linda Foster called the next afternoon. I remembered something. What? When Samuel passed away, there were several boxes nobody wanted. I frowned. What boxes? Personal workshop items. They were placed into long-term storage. Where? The old Morgan warehouse. I looked at Daniel. He immediately stood. We're going. The warehouse stood behind the family's original furniture factory. The business had closed almost 15 years earlier. Dust covered nearly everything inside. Old shelves, wooden cabinets, boxes stacked almost to the ceiling. The property manager unlocked the building. No one's been in here for years. Linda handed us an inventory list. Samuel labeled everything. For nearly 3 hours, we searched through old family photographs, business records, holiday decorations, scrapbooks. Nothing. Just as we prepared to leave, Daniel noticed an old cedar chest pushed beneath a workbench. It carried a small brass tag. Private SM. Samuel Morgan. Daniel knelt beside it. I've never seen this before. The lock had already rusted open. Inside, we found dozens of handwritten notebooks, letters, old family recipes, photographs, and one small envelope. Across the front, Samuel had written, Journal Addendum. My heart started racing. Inside the envelope, there wasn't another journal. There was a single folded document. The missing page. Someone hadn't destroyed it. They'd hidden it separately. Linda carefully unfolded it. At the top, Samuel had written, If this page is ever separated from my journal, someone has misunderstood why I wrote it. Daniel slowly sat down. None of us spoke. We simply listened while Linda continued reading. Samuel's handwriting had become weaker, but every word remained perfectly clear. Years ago, Claire came into our bakery every Saturday morning before work. I smiled through tears. He remembered. Before Daniel and I even met, I often bought fresh bread from the Morgan family's old neighborhood bakery. Samuel worked there every weekend after retiring. He continued writing. She never knew who I was. She simply believed an old widower shouldn't eat breakfast alone. Daniel looked at me. You never told me. I smiled softly. I didn't know it was your dad. Every Saturday, I'd shared coffee with an elderly man who reminded me of my grandfather. I never asked his last name. He never asked mine. Linda continued reading. After 6 months, Claire quietly paid for another customer's groceries without telling anyone. The following week, she baked a birthday cake for a little girl whose parents couldn't afford one. She refused payment. Tears rolled down my face. I barely remembered those moments. To me, they'd simply been ordinary acts of kindness. To Samuel, they had become unforgettable. Then came the paragraph that changed everything. When Daniel told me he had fallen in love with a woman named Claire, I already knew who she was. Daniel looked completely stunned. Samuel continued. Long before she became my daughter-in-law, she had already shown me what kind of person she was when she believed nobody was watching. The room became silent. Then Linda reached the final page. Folded behind Samuel's letter was another document. A notarized declaration, signed 6 months before his death. Linda carefully read it. I ask my family to welcome Claire not because she married my son, but because she has already lived the values this family claims to believe in. Kindness, generosity, integrity, humility. Daniel quietly wiped away tears. I could hardly breathe. Then Linda looked toward the final attachment. Her expression suddenly changed. This, what, isn't just a letter. She slowly unfolded another page hidden behind Samuel's declaration. It was a legal document. Officially witnessed. Officially notarized. Samuel had attached instructions for Linda herself. If the journal were ever found, she was to gather the entire Morgan family. Because the final promise wasn't meant to be read in private. It was meant to be read aloud. In front of everyone. Jessica had spent years convincing me I never truly belonged. In less than 48 hours, the words Samuel left behind were about to force the entire Morgan family to confront a truth they had avoided for years. 2 evenings later, every member of the Morgan family gathered inside the library of Margaret Morgan's home. No birthday decorations. No celebration. No laughter. Just quiet anticipation. Attorney Linda Foster had requested everyone's presence. She never explained why. Only that Samuel Morgan's final written instructions required the entire family to hear his words together. Jessica walked in confidently. She looked at me for only a second before turning away. I assume this won't take long. Linda calmly answered. That depends on how long the truth takes. Jessica frowned. What does that mean? No one answered. Daniel sat beside me. For the first time in years, he didn't choose the seat between me and his family. He chose the seat beside me. He quietly reached for my hand. I'm done staying silent. I smiled through nervous tears. That simple sentence meant more than he probably realized. Linda placed Samuel's journal on the table. Beside it, she carefully laid the missing page. The room immediately became silent. Margaret's eyes widened. I thought that journal disappeared. Linda looked at her. It almost did. Jessica shifted uncomfortably in her chair. For the first time, she wasn't the most confident person in the room. Linda opened the journal. I'm not here to offer opinions. I'm here to read Samuel Morgan's own words. She began reading slowly. Every sentence filled the room with memories. Stories about family, kindness, responsibility, love. Several people smiled through tears. Then she reached the missing page. The atmosphere changed instantly. She read aloud. Long before Claire became part of our family, she had already become part of my heart. Nobody moved. Jessica looked down at the floor. Linda continued. She treated an old stranger with kindness when she believed nothing would ever come from it. Character is revealed when no one is watching. Margaret quietly covered her mouth. Then came the paragraph none of us expected. If my family ever questions whether Claire belongs among us, remember this. She earned her place before any wedding ceremony ever took place. Marriage brought her into our home. Her heart welcomed her long before that. I couldn't stop crying. Daniel gently squeezed my hand. Across the room, even Margaret wiped away tears. When Linda finished reading, silence filled the room. Not awkward silence. Reflection. The kind of silence people fall into when they realize they've been wrong for a very long time. Jessica stood first. She walked slowly toward the window. For several seconds, she simply stared outside. Finally, she spoke. I was jealous. Everyone looked at her. She continued quietly. When Claire joined this family, Dad admired her. So did Daniel. So did Mom. I kept telling myself she was pretending. She slowly shook her head. But every year, she stayed kind. I couldn't understand why. Jessica turned toward me. I thought if I kept reminding you that you didn't belong, maybe I'd finally believe I belonged more. Her voice cracked. I wasn't protecting the family. I was protecting my own pride. No one interrupted. She looked at me. I've embarrassed you. Mocked your bakery. Ruined holidays. Even your birthday. I can't undo any of it. I'm sorry. For the first time, I believed she meant it. Margaret slowly stood, then walked directly toward me. I owe you an apology too. You never owed me anything. Yes. I did. She looked down at Samuel's journal. After Samuel died, I found the missing page. The room froze. Jessica stared at her mother. You did? Margaret nodded. I was afraid. Afraid of what? Linda quietly asked. Margaret answered through tears. I was afraid the journal would prove Samuel loved Claire more than his own daughter. Jessica looked stunned. I never knew. I never told you. Margaret whispered. I hid the page. I convinced myself I was protecting the family. Instead, I nearly destroyed it. Linda unfolded the final notarized document Samuel had left behind. There is one final instruction. Everyone became quiet again. She read aloud. If Claire ever receives this journal, I ask my family to honor one promise. Margaret slowly closed her eyes. Linda continued. Treat her exactly as you would if she had been born a Morgan. No conditions. No explanations. No exceptions. Just one promise. Samuel had trusted his family to do the right thing, even after he was gone. Then Linda revealed something none of us expected. Samuel had quietly established a small family legacy fund years earlier. Not a fortune. Just enough money to support future Morgan family traditions. Scholarships. Holiday gatherings. Community events. One clause determined who would oversee it. Linda smiled warmly. Samuel personally appointed Claire Morgan. Jessica looked surprised. Not me. Linda gently shook her head. He wrote. She pointed toward another paragraph. Choose the person who builds family rather than simply inheriting it. The room fell silent once again. Nobody argued. Nobody objected. Not even Jessica. Daniel smiled proudly. You already did that. I looked around the room. For the first time, no one questioned whether I belonged. No one doubted my place. I wasn't accepted because of a legal document, or because of money, or because someone won an argument. I was accepted because the truth finally gave everyone permission to see what Samuel had recognized years earlier. 3 months later, Sweet Haven Bakery celebrated another busy Saturday morning. The line stretched almost to the sidewalk. Children laughed while choosing cupcakes. Fresh bread filled the air with its familiar warmth. Life had quietly returned to normal. Only, it felt different. Jessica arrived carrying 2 large flower arrangements. Not because anyone asked her to, because she wanted to help decorate the bakery for our annual community fundraiser. She smiled awkwardly. I still don't know how to arrange flowers. I laughed. I noticed. She laughed too. For the first time. It wasn't forced. Relationships don't heal overnight. But they can begin with one honest apology. Margaret visited every Friday morning. She always ordered Samuel's favorite cinnamon bread. Then she'd sit at the corner table quietly reading his journal. One afternoon she looked up at me and smiled. He was right. About what? You. I smiled back. He usually was. Near the bakery entrance. A small wooden display case now held Samuel's journal, not the original, a carefully preserved copy. Beside it stood a simple brass plaque. It read, "Family isn't measured by blood alone. It's measured by the kindness we choose to give one another." Samuel Morgan. Customers often stopped to read it. Some smiled. Some quietly wiped away tears. Every single one understood its message. Sometimes, people ask me what the greatest birthday gift I've ever received was. They expect me to mention jewelry, or a vacation, or something expensive. Instead, I always give the same answer. It was an old journal inside a forgotten gift box. Because that journal didn't give me money, or property, or status. It gave me something far more valuable. The certainty that I had never needed anyone's permission to belong. Love had already made a place for me, long before anyone else finally saw it. And that will always be the greatest gift I've ever opened.